In 1930, archaeologists entered Gypsum Cave outside Las Vegas and found the remains of extinct Shasta ground sloths mixed through a cave that also contained human darts, cordage, torches, and stone tools. For a while, it looked as though people had occupied the cave alongside an Ice Age animal. That cave sits in the Mojave Desert, and it is far from the only place here where the evidence turned out to be more complicated than the first explanation. That place makes this list. So do 11 others. There is a volcanic canyon covered with nearly 1,700 designs that cannot be given one clean date. There is a vanished lake whose exposed shorelines preserve stone tools while stripping away the context needed to date them. And inside a military weapons range, Black Canyon walls carry thousands of bighorn sheep whose exact meaning remains unsettled. Make sure you stick with us to the end because number 1 comes down to a single fractured stone and one uncomfortable question: tool or naturally broken rock? This channel follows the overlooked places where geography, history, and archaeology refuse to fit neatly, so subscribe if that is your kind of rabbit hole. Today, we are counting down 12 ancient sites in the Mojave Desert that scientists still cannot completely explain. Number 12. Aiken's Wash National Register District. The wash where two kinds of ancient art collide. Near Baker, California, black volcanic rock spreads across washes, lava formations, and extinct cinder cones inside Mojave National Preserve. Aiken's Wash was added to the National Register on May 24, 1982, with a prehistoric period of significance listed as AD 500 to 1000. Archaeologists recorded rock shelters and evidence of habitation here, but also something visually unusual. People both painted and carved the landscape. Red pictographs survive alongside pecked petroglyphs at places including Aiken's Arch, Shadow Cave, Aiken's Tank, and other recorded localities. That is the signature detail: painted imagery and engraved rock art occupying the same volcanic archaeological landscape. Researchers can document where the images occur and how they relate physically. Their original social meanings are harder to recover. The district still survives, but its archaeological locations are protected and precise addresses are restricted. It is a reminder that even when the marks survive, the explanation can disappear. Number 11. Sloan Canyon Petroglyph Site. 1,700 messages with no translation. South of Las Vegas, Sloan Canyon National Conservation Area covers roughly 48,438 acres of Mojave Desert. Inside it are more than 300 rock writing panels containing nearly 1,700 individual designs. They were not all made at once. BLM documentation places the imagery across a span running from the archaic through the historic era. Archaeologists can compare weathering, superimposition, artifacts, styles, and recognizable historical subjects. None provides a perfect clock for every carving. Some proposed direct dating methods have failed badly enough that BLM's own archaeological plan discusses their limitations. Cash-in ratio dating, for example, produced no accepted dates and was abandoned by its inventor. That is Sloan Canyon's defining problem. Many methods can narrow an image to a sequence or range. Getting an exact date directly from a pecked design remains exceptionally difficult. The canyon is still protected and visitable under federal rules, although construction in 2026 temporarily changed normal access. Nearly 1,700 images remain. No single translation does. Number 10. Grapevine Canyon Petroglyphs, the canyon that kept rewriting itself. At the mouth of Grapevine Canyon in Nevada, pale granite walls close around a desert wash. More than 700 examples of rock art extend for over 100 meters, accompanied by 3 recorded rock shelters. The National Register gives the site's formal period of significance as AD 500 to 1499. Then the chronology gets less tidy. Recent archaeological work has argued that possible depictions of atlatls may push at least some imagery back before roughly AD 600. Other designs cannot be assigned such convenient technological clues. People also seem to have returned to the same panels. Nevada Rock Art Foundation documentation found carvings that had apparently been re-pecked along their original outlines, not erased, refreshed. That is the detail that changes the story. Later, visitors were apparently doing more than adding another symbol beside an older one. In some cases, they seem to have deliberately kept older images visible. Grapevine Canyon also lies within a landscape of continuing cultural importance to indigenous communities near Aviqua Ame, or Spirit Mountain. That makes simplistic interpretations especially risky. These were not necessarily isolated pictures made by one population for one purpose. The site remains within Lake Mead National Recreation Area and still receives visitors. Its precise archaeological address is formally restricted, and vandalism has occurred in the past. We can count the carvings. We can study which lines cross others. We can even identify signs of people returning to them. What those people believed they were preserving is another matter. Number 9. The Black Canyon, Inscription Canyon, Black Mountain Rock Art District, 12,000 marks in the lava. Northwest of Barstow, California, basalt scarps and dark lava spread across a large archaeological landscape. The district entered the National Register in 2000. More than 12,000 petroglyphs have been reported across it, with Inscription Canyon alone containing more than 1,000 designs. The subjects vary dramatically: human-like figures, masks, shields, baskets, deer, bighorn sheep, geometric forms. But this was not simply an outdoor gallery. BLM documentation describes occupation areas, stoneworking locations, hunting sites, spiritual values, and a major prehistoric transportation corridor within the larger district. People were moving through this landscape, working in it, hunting in it, staying in it, and repeatedly marking it. That helps explain why there are so many images. It does not tell us exactly what each one meant. The signature detail is the scale. More than 12,000 reported petroglyphs are distributed across an archaeological district rather than concentrated on one convenient wall. Generations encountered images already present and added others. Archaeologists can recognize that accumulation without safely assigning every symbol to one period or one purpose. The district remains on protected federal land, and BLM has documented damage to prehistoric resources from vehicle travel. The desert preserved thousands of marks for centuries. A tire track can cross one in seconds. Number 8. Newberry Cave. The ritual cave archaeologists can never fully rebuild. Southeast of Barstow, the volcanic Newberry Mountains rise above the Mojave River corridor. Somewhere within that landscape is a tube-like cave whose exact location is protected. Excavators worked there primarily during the 1950s. What they recovered was exceptional: split twig animal figurines, atlatl dart material, projectile points, pigments, crystals, painted animal imagery. Later radiocarbon analysis placed the principal ritual assemblage broadly between about 2480 and 1215 BC. The dating also indicated that the split twig figurines and atlatl darts were used essentially contemporaneously. Researchers propose that the figurines, hunting equipment, and zoomorphic paintings may represent a broader ritual complex connected to bighorn sheep hunting. It is an unusually coherent possibility. And then comes the problem. The original excavation had poor vertical control. Clearly recognizable stratigraphic levels were not adequately maintained, which weakened the provenience of some finds. In archaeology, that matters enormously. Finding two things inside the same cave does not automatically mean they were deposited together. Newberry Cave demonstrates that perfectly because ground sloth remains were also found there. Those remains turned out to be far older than the dated human ritual assemblage. No reliable evidence showed that people and those sloths belonged to the same occupation. The signature detail is almost painful. The cave held extraordinary evidence, but the excavation itself permanently erased some of the relationships later researchers needed to interpret it with confidence. Modern radiocarbon work recovered part of the story. It cannot recreate sediment that was already removed. Today, the cave remains a protected archaeological resource. The surviving artifacts, scientific records, and pictographs matter more than turning the location into an exploration destination. Newberry is mysterious for an unusual reason. Part of the missing evidence did not disappear in antiquity. We lost it while trying to understand what was there. Number 7. The Pinto Basin type sites. The culture discovered beside a river that wasn't there. Pinto Basin is an enormous exposed landscape inside Joshua Tree National Park. Desert pavement and washes stretch toward distant mountains, and today the place is exceptionally dry. Yet archaeological sites there preserve what the National Park Service describes as the earliest known human activity documented in that portion of the park. During work in the 1920s and 1930s, William and Elizabeth Campbell recognized a distinctive assemblage of projectile points. The thick triangular points had notched shoulders, broad stems, and were associated with atlatl technology. The pattern became important enough to give its name to the Pinto culture. NPS now places that occupation broadly between about 4,000 and 8,000 years ago. The Campbells had another explanation for what they were seeing. They believed these camps had existed near a river or lake. It made sense. Reliable water would help explain repeated human use of a desert basin. But newer geological research cited by NPS rejected the idea that such a river or lake still existed there during the occupation. That is Pinto Basin's signature detail. The Campbells correctly identified an important archaeological culture, while their proposed environmental explanation for its location did not survive later research. The tools suggest highly mobile hunters and seasonal plant gatherers. NPS also says there is little evidence securely linking Pinto culture directly with present-day tribal groups. The broad basin remains public park landscape, while individual archaeological sites are protected. Sometimes archaeology does not overturn the discovery. It overturns the reason everyone thought the discovery made sense. Number 6. The Lake Mojave Archaeological Complex. The culture scattered across a vanished lake. Soda Lake and Silver Lake are now broad, exposed basins in San Bernardino County. They preserve the outline of ancient Lake Mojave, a much wetter landscape than the desert visible today. The archaeology around those old shorelines became important enough to define an entire regional period. A commonly used chronology places the Lake Mojave period between roughly 8,000 and 5,000 BC, although other frameworks shift those boundaries. Researchers identify the period through characteristic material, including Great Basin stemmed or Lake Mojave points, Silver Lake points, bifaces, crescents, unifaces, and occasional groundstone. Those objects appear around former shorelines, not only here, but across a wider network of Mojave paleolakes. And the desert has done archaeologists a strange favor. It exposed them. That is also the problem. Many Lake Mojave artifacts lie on open surfaces rather than inside sealed archaeological deposits. Sediment erodes. Objects move. Organic material that could produce a radiocarbon date disappears. The signature detail is the paradox itself. The desert exposes thousands of years of archaeology beautifully, while the same exposure destroys much of the stratigraphic context needed to date individual objects precisely. Archaeologists can build a regional sequence from repeated patterns and diagnostic tools. They cannot responsibly attach an exact year to every point sitting on a playa. The dry basins and ancient shorelines are still there, and the archaeological material remains protected. The lake vanished. Its evidence stayed behind, just loose enough to keep some of its secrets. Number 5. Tule Springs Archaeological Site, the dig that tried to rewrite American prehistory. On the edge of Las Vegas, pale badlands and deep washes preserve a major record of late Pleistocene life. By the middle of the 20th century, researchers had found extinct animal remains, charcoal, and objects suspected of human modification across this landscape. The possibility was enormous. Could people have lived here beside mammoths and other extinct megafauna much earlier than accepted archaeological chronologies allowed? In 1962 and 1963, researchers launched what became known as the Big Dig. This was not a modest trench with a few brushes. Heavy equipment cut enormous exposures through the deposits. Archaeologists worked beside geologists and paleontologists, using radiocarbon dating at a field scale that was still remarkable for the period. They were trying to test a very specific proposition, and the proposition failed. C. Vance Haynes's stratigraphic work showed that confirmed human artifacts came from the youngest deposits. Those same deposits did not contain the Pleistocene megafaunal fossils required to demonstrate the proposed association. One of the most ambitious early man excavations in the country discovered that the evidence people had come to prove was not actually present in the required layers. That is the signature detail. It is also why Tule Springs belongs here without being misrepresented. Scientists did not stare at the evidence and give up. They investigated the mystery and rejected the dramatic explanation. Research continued. Later work documented nearly 600 additional fossil localities and more than 40,000 vertebrate fossils, making Tule Springs an exceptionally rich Pleistocene record, even without the early human claim. Today, Tule Springs Fossil Beds National Monument protects much of the landscape. Nearby, Ice Age Fossil State Park interprets the Big Dig, and surviving trench features remain visible. We opened this video with Gypsum Cave, where another apparent human megafauna connection fell apart under closer examination. Let us know in the comments which of these changing interpretations surprised you more. And if you are enjoying the deep dive, a thumbs up helps more people find these stories, and the remaining sites get considerably harder to untangle. Tule Springs did not produce the answer people wanted. It produced something more useful, a reason to stop believing it. Number 4. Gypsum Cave, the cave where humans and giant sloths seem to meet. In the limestone mountains east of Las Vegas, the desert heat gives way to deep, dark chambers. Mark Raymond Harrington directed major excavations here around 1930 and 1931. The cave contained remains of the extinct Shasta ground sloth, including bones and dung. It also contained human material, dart shafts, stone points, cordage, torches, other cultural objects. Put those discoveries together on paper, and the conclusion seems almost unavoidable. Humans and extinct ground sloths had occupied the same cave. That interpretation carried serious implications for the antiquity of people in the region, but caves are deceptive archives. Animals burrow, sediments move, humans return after long gaps. Objects from different periods can end up physically near one another without ever having existed together. Radiocarbon dating eventually exposed the problem. An atlatl dart from the cave produced an age of less than 3,000 years before present. The sloth material was substantially older. The dramatic Pleistocene association collapsed. Human weapons and extinct sloth remains really were found in the same cave. Radiocarbon dating showed they did not belong to the same moment in time. That is the signature detail, and it is more interesting than pretending the original claims survived. Gypsum Cave still became an important archaeological site. It gave its name to gypsum projectile points and became an early landmark in work where archaeology and paleontology had to learn to separate different histories preserved inside the same deposit. The cave survives today as a protected research resource. Many of the objects that matter most are preserved in institutional collections rather than left where casual visitors could disturb them. Gypsum Cave looks like a story about ancient people meeting an extinct animal. It turned into a story about something more basic. Two things can be inches apart and thousands of years apart at the same time. Number 3. The Coso Rock Art District, the desert gallery that suddenly went quiet. Across the Coso Range in California, black basalt canyons sit within Naval Air Weapons Station China Lake. That controlled military landscape contains one of the great concentrations of rock art in North America. Little Petroglyph Canyon alone has approximately 20,000 documented images, according to the U.S. Navy. Bighorn sheep dominate much of the imagery. Generations pecked animals and other forms through dark desert varnish. Archaeological studies emphasize increased production after about 1500 BC, while the classic Coso tradition appears to have ended by roughly AD 1300. Individual carvings may be older or younger. Even the Navy's interpretation acknowledges that no exact age can be assigned to the full body of images. Meaning is equally unsettled. Researchers have proposed ceremony, mythology, hunting symbolism, clan identification, mapping, and other explanations. Earlier scholarship often emphasized hunting magic. More recent work has tested ecological and social models, including connections between intensified rock art production, declining bighorn populations, and cultural competition. These are models. There is no surviving written explanation from the people who carved the canyon walls, and that leads to the signature detail. The strangest question may not be why people started producing this imagery. It is why intensive production eventually stopped after centuries of extraordinary investment. Thousands upon thousands of images accumulated. Then the classic tradition ended. Scientific dating remains difficult because a petroglyph does not contain a convenient organic sample for radiocarbon analysis. Researchers instead combined regional archaeology, imagery, varnish studies, and relative sequences. The rock art remains federally protected inside the weapons station. The Navy currently says tours of Little Petroglyph Canyon are not being offered. That leaves an unusual modern boundary around an ancient question. The carvings remain behind military gates. The people who made them left no key. Number 2. The Lake Manix lithic industry. The Stone Age culture that may not exist. The former Lake Manix Basin lies in the central Mojave, where eroded terraces and desert pavement now occupy a landscape that once held water. For decades, heavily weathered stone objects found along those old surfaces seem to tell an extraordinary story. Researchers grouped them into what became known as the Manix Lake lithic industry. The assemblage included hand-axe-like bifaces, cores, flakes, and scrapers. Because these objects appeared around ancient lakeshore surfaces, some proposed ages extended deep into the late Pleistocene. The logic felt persuasive. An ancient lake would have offered water, animals, and shoreline resources. Ancient-looking tools sat nearby. Here's the thing, nearby is not the same as dated. BLM now explicitly notes that most of the defining material occurs as surface distributions, which means its supposed antiquity cannot presently be demonstrated. Objects can move across desert surfaces after deposition. Erosion can expose them, older landforms can collect younger material. A stone lying on a Pleistocene surface is not automatically a Pleistocene artifact. Then researchers attacked a more basic assumption. Was this even a distinct industry? A detailed reassessment concluded that much of the material could plausibly represent ordinary early-stage quarry reduction debris rather than a unique Pleistocene cultural tradition. The criteria separating supposed ancient implements from later stoneworking waste began to collapse. That creates the signature detail. Archaeologists may have named an entire lithic industry around objects whose supposedly ancient identity could never actually be demonstrated. The Lake Manix Basin remains archaeologically valuable. Its shorelines and surface scatters continue to preserve information about human use of the Mojave, but the historical Manix Lake industry should not be presented as proof of an unknown pre-Clovis population. Its importance now lies partly in the failure of that interpretation. Sometimes the most consequential archaeological discovery is realizing that the category you created may have been the mystery all along. Number 1. Calico Early Man Site. Artifacts, or just broken rocks. Pale gravel covers the slopes beneath the Calico Mountains. Loose stone shifts with every step. Excavation cuts expose layers of alluvium beneath hard Mojave light. In your hand, one fractured piece of stone has edges that seem deliberate. Then you turn it over. Another scar, another edge. It looks like a tool. That is where the trouble begins. Calico lies roughly 15 miles northeast of Barstow, California. Amateur archaeologists were already reporting apparently primitive stone objects from this landscape in the 1940s. During the 1960s, Louis Leakey became deeply involved with the excavations and their interpretation, participating prominently from 1964 through 1970. Leakey understood what was at stake. Thousands of fractured stones were recovered from surface and subsurface deposits, some at considerable depth. If those objects were deliberately manufactured by people, and if they belonged to the genuinely ancient deposits surrounding them, Calico could push human presence in this part of North America dramatically further back than accepted archaeology allowed. The geological deposits could be old. The decisive question was whether the stones were artifacts. In 1973, geologist Vance Haynes reduced the entire controversy to a title in the journal Science. The Calico Site, Artifacts or Geofacts? 5 words. That remains the signature detail. Haynes argued that tectonic stress, weathering, transport, rock striking rock, burial, and other natural processes could fracture stone in ways that resemble crude human flaking. A sharp edge is not enough. A pattern that looks intentional is not automatically intentional, and at Calico, that distinction carries an extraordinary amount of weight. BLM's own archaeological synthesis now treats the situation carefully. The deposits can be of demonstrated Pleistocene age, while the supposed artifacts within them have not been demonstrated to be human-made. Those are 2 separate claims. The majority archaeological view has therefore not accepted Calico as evidence for extremely early human occupation of North America. That does not make the site meaningless. Quite the opposite. Calico exposes one of archaeology's hardest problems in its simplest possible form. Archaeologists often recognize human behavior through patterns left in material, but geology produces patterns too. Water moves stone, pressure breaks it. Rocks strike one another, weather removes surfaces. Thousands of years pass. Eventually, something produced without a human hand can look suspiciously like something made by one. BLM closed the public site beginning in 2016 because of safety and vandalism concerns, then reopened it in 2023 after remediation work. The excavation landscape, collections, and decades of argument remain, and there is no need to turn Calico into proof of an impossibly ancient civilization to make it compelling. Its real question is better. You can hold the evidence in your hand. You can study every fracture. You can know the surrounding sediment is ancient. And after all of that, you still have to answer the simplest question on this list. Did a person make this, or did the desert? The stone does not say. That is why Calico stays with you. There are more Mojave sites where old landscapes, rock art, and disputed evidence still leave archaeologists with unfinished questions. My favorite is Calico, because the entire argument reduces thousands of years of prehistory to the surface of one fractured stone. Which site surprised you most, and which Mojave story should have made the list? Subscribe for more forgotten places and unresolved history.